Welcome to your own personal deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at The Big Leap
The Big Leap, yeah.
by Gay Hendricks.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be talking about all the things that are holding you back
Yeah.
from your full potential, and not just in your career, but in wealth and love, too.
Okay.
Get ready to crank up your inner thermostat for success and happiness.
Yeah, it's so fascinating how Hendricks really pinpoints this thing that he calls the upper limit problem.
Yeah.
And it's really this kind of like ceiling that we set for ourselves without even knowing it.
Yeah.
That limits the amount of success, love, and even creativity we allow into our lives.
It's like we get to this point where we're like, okay, this is my comfort zone for good things.
Right.
And as soon as we start to exceed that comfort zone,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
we're like, I don't know about that. And then we start to sabotage ourselves.
Yeah, you get a little freaked out.
Yeah, a little freak out.
And you're like, how do I get back down to what feels comfortable and familiar?
Early. And Hendricks even admits to doing this himself.
Yeah, exactly. He talks about this time where he was feeling super happy and content, and then all of a sudden he's just consumed with worry about his daughter who was away at summer camp.
Oh, wow.
And he was so worried he actually called her to check on her,
Oh, no.
only to find out she was having an amazing time.
She was fine.
She was totally fine, and he was like, wait a minute, I was just manufacturing these problems
Yeah.
in my head to kind of bring myself back down from this peak of joy, and it was like a total light bulb moment for him.
So interesting. So I'm curious, does everyone have this problem?
Hendricks argues that it is a universal human tendency. It's just something that we all do. And to understand it a little bit better, he breaks it down into 4 different zones that we operate in, and he calls those zones incompetence, competence, excellence, and genius.
So it's like these 4 different levels.
Yeah, think about it like different levels of
Fine here.
engagement and fulfillment.
In our work and in our lives?
And in your work and in your life.
Got it. Okay. So we've got these 4 zones. What kind of things fall into each zone?
So the incompetence zone is like where you feel the most out of your element.
Right.
Like you're struggling to keep up.
Yeah.
These are the tasks that you just dread and avoid at all costs. And then there's the competence zone,
Okay.
where you're capable, you can do the work, but it doesn't really light you up.
Yeah.
You're just kind of going through the motions.
Into there.
Totally been there.
For sure.
And then there's the excellence zone.
Okay.
This is where you shine, you're skilled, you're efficient, you're delivering really high quality work.
Yeah.
It can be rewarding,
Uh-huh.
but it's not necessarily like where you feel the most fulfilled.
Right.
And that brings us to the zone of genius.
Ooh. This sounds good.
Yeah, this is where you're operating effortlessly.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're in the state of flow.
Mm.
Time flies by, creativity is just flourishing, and you feel this deep sense of purpose and joy in what you're doing.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, but here's the catch. Hendricks argues that most of us spend way too much time in those first 3 zones, and we're actually avoiding the zone of genius where we truly thrive.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah.
How do we figure out what our zone of genius is?
We'll definitely unpack that later on.
Okay, good.
But first I want to share something really interesting.
Okay.
Hendricks argues that even wildly successful people like
Oh.
Bill Clinton,
Wow.
John Belushi, and Boris Becker
Okay.
have struggled with this upper limit problem.
Really?
Yeah, it's not just about those external achievements.
Mhm.
It's about overcoming those internal barriers that we set for ourselves.
So you're telling me that even someone like Bill Clinton, who achieved his goal of becoming president, could be held back by this?
Right, think about it.
Hmm.
He reaches this incredible goal of becoming president of the United States.
Right.
And then what happens?
Yeah.
He gets caught up in this scandal that really tarnishes his legacy. It's almost as if hitting that pinnacle triggered his upper limit problem.
Wow.
And led to self-sabotage.
It makes you wonder what would have happened if he had addressed this problem beforehand.
It's a reminder that these hidden barriers can affect anyone,
Yeah.
regardless of their accomplishments.
So this isn't just some self-help theory. This is a real phenomenon
It is a real...
that's playing out in people's lives,
Absolutely.
even those at the very top.
Yeah.
This is where it gets really relevant for you.
Yes.
Because if these high achievers are struggling with this, chances are you've encountered your own upper limit
Absolutely.
in some area of your life.
In some area of your life,
Right.
for sure. And to really understand how to overcome these limits, We need to dive into the 4 hidden barriers that Hendricks identifies.
Okay.
He argues that these barriers are all rooted in fear and false beliefs that we've internalized often from our past experiences.
So these barriers are kind of like these walls that we've built around ourselves.
Yes, invisible walls
Yeah.
that we've built around ourselves that keep us from reaching our full potential.
Okay. I'm ready to break down these walls.
Me too.
Hmm.
The first one is the belief that we are fundamentally flawed.
Mm.
This is that unconscious feeling that we're not good enough,
Yeah.
not worthy of happiness, success, or love.
Oof. I'm already feeling a bit called out.
Right.
Where does this belief even come from?
It often comes from our early childhood experiences
Yeah.
that kind of create this sense of unworthiness.
Hmm.
Hendricks shares this story about a client named Carl who, as a child, was often the target of his father's anger after this bitter divorce.
Oh, wow.
And even though it wasn't Carl's fault,
Right.
he internalized this feeling of being bad or wrong,
Yeah.
and that feeling just stuck with him
Mhm.
and ended up affecting his success later in life.
So even seemingly unrelated childhood events can have this lasting impact
Yeah,
on how we view ourselves and our potential.
absolutely.
That's pretty powerful. What are some of the other barriers?
The second barrier is rooted in the fear of disloyalty and abandonment.
Okay.
This is that fear that our success will lead us to leave loved ones behind, triggering feelings of guilt and ultimately causing us to sabotage our own progress.
This is where it gets really interesting because Hendricks talks about this story
Yes.
of Robert and Dee,
Robert and Dee,
a newlywed couple
newly.
from very different backgrounds.
Yeah, Robert's family was very wealthy, and they didn't really approve of Dee, who came from a much more humble background.
Okay.
And as Robert was finishing up his medical residency, his family was pressuring them to delay the wedding until he had a job lined up.
Oh.
And this totally triggered Robert's fear of disloyalty. Like, he was so worried that success was going to separate him from Dee and her family that he subconsciously sabotaged himself.
So what happened? Did they cave to the pressure?
They did the opposite.
Really?
Yeah, they ended up disappearing on this spontaneous road trip right before Robert's final exams.
What?
It was classic self-sabotage.
Oh my gosh.
Triggered by that fear of disloyalty.
Wow.
And it didn't end there.
Oh.
Dee was actually great with finances, but she ended up making some bad investment decisions based on Robert's advice.
Hmm.
And it turned out that Robert was feeling really insecure about his family's disapproval.
Yeah.
And he was trying to impress her with his financial knowledge,
Oh.
which led to further self-sabotage.
Wow. Good intentions gone wrong.
Totally.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's like they were subconsciously trying to prove his family right.
Right.
And just stay stuck in their old patterns.
Like they were trying to stay small.
Yeah. What did Hendricks suggest they do?
He encouraged them to have what he calls the sweaty 10-minute conversation
The sweaty 10-minute conversation.
with Robert's family
Okay.
to address the root of the problem.
Wow.
He said sometimes you just got to face those difficult conversations head on
Yeah.
to really break free from these hidden barriers.
Okay, so we've got 2 barriers down,
2 down.
feeling fundamentally flawed,
Yes.
and fear of disloyalty and abandonment.
Yep.
What's next?
The third barrier is the belief that success brings a bigger burden.
Okay, that's interesting. Why would we believe that?
It often stems from early experiences where we felt like a burden to our families.
Mm.
Hendricks himself felt this way as a child, especially after his unexpected birth.
Wow.
He even shares this story about presenting his first published book
Mhm.
to his mother and brother, and they just kind of put it aside without a word of congratulations.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
It's sad.
It just shows how those early experiences
Yeah,
can shape our beliefs about success
absolutely.
and our worthiness to receive it.
Totally.
Have you ever noticed this in your own life?
Yeah.
That feeling like your success might be a burden to others?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Hendricks himself talks about how even after he achieved financial success,
Yeah.
he still struggled with this feeling
Hmm.
that the more he achieved, the more of a burden he became.
Oh.
It's a reminder that these unconscious beliefs can follow us even into adulthood,
Right.
limiting our ability to really fully embrace our achievements. And this leads us to the final hidden barrier,
Okay, what is it?
the crime of outshining.
The crime of outshining. This sounds almost counterintuitive.
I know.
Wouldn't we want to outshine others, especially in such a competitive world?
Logically, yes, but this barrier is all about the fear that our success will make others feel inadequate.
Hmm.
It's like we're afraid to fully embrace our brilliance
Yeah.
because we don't want to outshine the people around us.
I can see how that would come from, like, sibling rivalry or childhood experiences
Absolutely.
where maybe you were taught to downplay your accomplishments
Yeah,
so as to not make other people feel bad.
totally. And Hendricks gives this really compelling example with the musician Kenny Loggins.
Kenny Loggins.
Yeah, he achieved incredible success in his career,
Yeah.
but he struggled to actually enjoy it because of this very barrier.
What was holding him back?
So it turns out that his upbringing involved a lot of competition with his siblings for parental attention, which created this unconscious fear of outshining others that prevented him from fully embracing his success without feeling guilty.
So even someone like Kenny Loggins, who had reached the pinnacle of his career, was held back by these deep-seated fears.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating how these patterns can play out, even in the lives of people who we think are incredibly successful.
Right. And what's even more fascinating is that Hendricks discovered a very similar pattern with Loggins' musical partner, Jim Messina.
Oh, wow.
Both of them had experiences with favored siblings, leading to this unconscious fear of outshining others.
It's like these patterns repeat themselves, even in our professional partnership.
Absolutely.
It's like we're carrying these invisible scripts from our past and playing them out without even realizing it.
Totally.
That leads us to the next part of the book, where Hendricks really dives into the specific behaviors we use to upper limit ourselves.
Yeah.
Are you ready to explore those?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah. So the first one Hendricks tackles is something we can probably all relate to, worry.
You mean like when I worry I left the stove on, that kind of worry?
Not quite. He's not talking about that productive worry that motivates you to take action, like, oh, I better go back and check that stove.
Right.
He's talking about that unproductive, spiraling kind of worry
Yeah.
that tends to creep in, especially when things are actually going well in our lives.
So it's almost like our minds are looking for problems.
Yeah.
To bring us back down to earth
Yeah.
when we start to feel too good.
Exactly. Hendricks argues that this kind of worry is a classic sign that we're bumping up against our upper limit. It's our subconscious mind trying to maintain that sense of equilibrium, even if it means keeping us stuck.
Wow, so instead of getting bogged down in the worry itself,
Yeah.
we need to shift our perspective.
Yes.
And look for the opportunity hidden within it.
Exactly. He actually provides a 7-step process for turning this unproductive worry into positive action.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What are those 7 steps?
So the first step is simply noticing when you're worrying, then consciously shift your focus away from those thoughts. Remember, it's not about ignoring the problem. It's about recognizing that most worry is unproductive and not helpful.
Got it.
Then ask yourself, what positive new thing is trying to come into being?
That's a powerful question.
It's a powerful question that can help you reframe the situation and open you up to new possibilities.
I like that.
Hendricks even shares a personal example of how he used this process to transform worry into insight and connection.
Tell me more about that. What happened?
So he was walking past a jewelry store, admiring all the beautiful pieces in the window.
Okay.
And almost immediately, he found himself worrying about money and whether he had enough to help a family member with their education. But instead of getting swept away by that worry, he recognized it as an upper limit symptom and shifted his focus. He asked himself that powerful question, what positive new thing is trying to come into being?
Okay, and what did he discover?
He realized that the real issue wasn't actually about money at all.
Okay.
Seeing the jewelry had triggered feelings of guilt about his own abundance compared to others, but it also sparked a deeper appreciation for his wife and their relationship.
Wow.
By recognizing that worry as an upper limit problem, he was able to transform those negative feelings into a deeper connection.
That's amazing. So we've got worry as a major upper limit behavior.
Yes.
What other behaviors do we use to hold ourselves back?
Another common one is blame and criticism. It's so easy to fall into the trap of blaming others when things go wrong.
Yeah.
But Hendricks argues that blame is often just a way to deflect responsibility and avoid those good feelings that are trying to come in.
So instead of looking inward and taking ownership, we point fingers outward.
Exactly. He tells this hilarious story about a billionaire who was constantly criticizing his wife for buying expensive toilet paper.
Wait a minute, the guy's a billionaire.
I know.
What could he possibly be worried about?
Exactly. It was a clear case of misplaced criticism masking a deeper issue. It turned out that the billionaire was actually worried about losing money, even though he could afford to lose millions without a significant impact on his wealth.
Wow.
His criticism of his wife's spending was simply a way to deflect from his own anxieties and
Mm.
avoid feeling too good about his financial success.
It's a reminder that often the things we criticize in others are reflections of our own fears and insecurities.
Absolutely. It's easier to point fingers than to look in the mirror.
That's so true.
And that brings us to another upper limit, behavior deflection.
Okay.
This is when we brush off compliments or downplay our achievements.
Yeah.
It's like we're afraid to acknowledge our own success.
Right. So instead of celebrating our wins, we kind of deflect the positive attention.
Exactly. Hendricks uses this funny analogy of a group of golfers who are masters of deflection.
Mm.
They just can't accept a simple compliment on their game without downplaying their skills.
They're just uncomfortable with being too good.
Exactly, even in a friendly game.
You know, I can totally relate to that. I've definitely been guilty of deflecting compliments myself.
Yeah.
It's almost like we feel the need to minimize our accomplishments so we don't make others feel bad.
Right, and that ties back to that crime of outshining that we talked about earlier. It's that deeply ingrained fear that prevents us from fully owning our brilliance.
It makes you wonder where we learn these behaviors.
It's fascinating, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got worry, blame, and deflection.
Okay.
What other sneaky ways do we upper limit ourselves?
I don't know. What else could there be?
Well, there's also squabbling.
Wobbling.
Arguments and conflict are a quick way to lower that positive energy and regain a sense of control.
You mean like when couples fight about who unloaded the dishwasher last?
Exactly.
Even though they're both happy and things are generally going well?
Exactly. Hendricks has this really interesting perspective on arguments.
Okay, I'm listening.
He calls them a race to occupy the victim position.
A race to the victim position.
Each person wants to be seen as the wronged party, which makes it nearly impossible to find a resolution.
It's like we're so focused on proving our own righteousness
Yes.
that we lose sight of the bigger picture.
Totally.
The fact that we're both on the same team.
Exactly. And Hendricks emphasizes that each person in a conflict is 100% responsible for resolving it.
I like that.
It's not about assigning blame.
Yeah.
It's about taking ownership of your role in the situation.
Yeah. It takes the focus off of who's right or wrong
Right.
and puts it on finding a solution that works for both parties.
Absolutely. And speaking of finding solutions,
Yes.
this next upper limit behavior might surprise you getting sick or hurt.
Wait, are you saying that getting sick can be a way to sabotage ourselves?
It might sound strange, but Hendricks suggests that physical symptoms can sometimes be manifestations of the upper limit problem.
Okay, I need you to break this down for me.
Mm-hmm.
How can getting sick be a form of self-sabotage?
Okay, so let's start with punishment. He gives this really compelling example of a successful executive named Ryan who would get these debilitating migraines.
Oh, no.
It turned out they were often triggered after he had an affair with his secretary.
Wow.
It was like his body was punishing him for the guilt he felt over his actions.
So his physical symptoms were a reflection of his internal struggle.
Exactly. It highlights that profound connection between our minds and bodies.
Yeah.
And guess what? Once Ryan addressed the root of the problem and confessed to his wife, the migraines miraculously stopped.
He literally healed himself
Yeah.
by facing the truth and taking responsibility.
Right.
That's so powerful.
Yeah.
What about prevention and protection?
Okay, so Hendricks uses the example of Dr. Smith, who developed laryngitis.
Oh.
On the morning he was scheduled to give a presentation about his work.
Wow.
It turned out that he had accepted this new job that he was super excited about, but he wasn't ready to announce it yet.
Okay.
So his laryngitis conveniently prevented him from having to give a presentation that he didn't want to give,
Right.
and it protected him from having to lie to his colleagues.
So his body created a symptom to get him out of a situation that he'd rather avoid.
Exactly.
Oh, my goodness. It's fascinating how our subconscious minds can work to keep us safe, even if it means getting sick.
Yeah, it's like we have this internal safety mechanism that kicks in when we're about to exceed our upper limit.
Wow.
Even if we consciously desire that success or change.
She's so interesting.
And there's one more upper limit behavior. Hendricks covers hiding significant feelings.
What does that mean exactly?
It's about how those unexpressed emotions can lead to projection and conflict in our relationships.
Okay.
He uses this really interesting example of Sarah and Jonah, a couple who were constantly fighting about perceived infidelity.
They were both convinced the other was cheating.
Yeah, but the reality was that Sarah was actually struggling with her own attraction to someone else.
Oh, wow.
But she had buried those feelings, which then led her to project them onto Jonah, accusing him of similar behavior.
So it's a classic case of what we resist persists.
Exactly.
When we try to hide or suppress our true feelings, they often find a way to surface in really unhealthy ways.
And that's a good point. It's a reminder that honesty and open communication are so crucial
Yeah.
in relationships. When we try to hide our true feelings, it often creates more problems than it solves.
So we've explored all these different upper limit behaviors, from worry and blame to getting sick and hiding our feelings.
Yeah.
It's eye-opening to see how many ways we can unknowingly sabotage ourselves.
Totally.
But what can we actually do about it? How do we break free from these patterns?
That's where the real work begins.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Hendricks provides a lot of practical advice for recognizing these behaviors and shifting our mindset.
Okay.
He encourages us to really explore our own family story and consider how it might be contributing to our own individual upper limit problems.
So we need to kind of trace back to our roots
Yeah.
and understand how our past experiences might be shaping our present behaviors.
Exactly. He also suggests making a list of your own personal upper limit behaviors. Whether it's worrying, blaming, getting sick, hiding feelings, or deflecting,
Yeah.
simply becoming aware of these patterns is the first step to breaking free.
It's like shining a light on those hidden patterns
Yes.
so they can no longer operate in the shadows.
Exactly. And remember, it's not about beating yourself up for these behaviors.
Right.
It's about approaching them with curiosity and a desire to understand how they're holding you back.
Okay, so what's next? How do we make that big leap into the zone of genius? That's
Yeah.
the million-dollar question, right? How do we actually make that leap from feeling limited to living in that zone of genius where we truly thrive?
That's where the real transformation begins. Hendricks talks about moving from the confining boxes of those lower zones, competence, even excellence,
Yeah.
to the expansive spiral of the zone of genius. It's about shifting from a mindset of limitation to a place of unlimited potential.
Okay, I'm ready to spiral. But how do we actually get there?
Hendricks gives us a roadmap in the form of 4 powerful questions that he calls the genius questions. And these questions are designed to help us uncover that sweet spot where our passions and talents intersect that place where work doesn't feel like work and we're just naturally in flow.
So these genius questions are like keys to unlock our zone of genius.
Exactly.
I'm all ears. What are they?
So the first one asks, what do I do that doesn't feel like work? It's about identifying those activities that energize us, the things we could do for hours without feeling drained or watching the clock.
I've definitely had those moments in my life where I'm so engrossed in something that I completely lose track of time.
Right.
And I feel this sense of joy and purpose. Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly. And Hendricks actually tells the story about this executive who realized he hadn't been doing what he loved most since he'd become CEO. He used to love wandering around connecting with other executives in these casual conversations.
Yeah.
But his new role had kind of isolated him and led to this feeling of dissatisfaction.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So it's a good reminder that sometimes we get so caught up in the demands of our roles that we forget to prioritize those activities that truly bring us joy.
Yeah, it's easy to lose sight of what really matters. So the first question helps us identify those activities that feel effortless and energizing.
Right.
What's the second genius question?
Okay, so it digs a little deeper. It asks, what am I doing when I feel most fully alive? This one is all about recognizing those moments when we're completely engaged and in flow, where creativity and inspiration come naturally.
This reminds me of those athletes who talk about being in the zone during a competition.
Yes.
It's like time slows down and they're performing at their peak effortlessly and intuitively.
Exactly. It's that feeling of being completely present and aligned with our purpose. And that leads us to the third genius question, which is, what brings me the greatest sense of meaning and purpose?
Okay.
This one's about connecting with our values and understanding what truly matters to us, both personally and professionally.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where our work aligns with our deeper values and makes a positive impact on the world.
Absolutely. And then finally, the fourth genius question challenges us to identify our unique ability.
Ooh.
Hendricks describes it as that special skill I'm gifted with that can benefit both myself and others.
I like that. So it's about recognizing that we all have something unique to offer the world.
Yes.
A special talent or a gift that sets us apart.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not about ego or bragging rights.
Right.
It's about understanding how we can use our unique abilities to make a positive impact and contribute to something larger than ourselves.
Did Hendricks ever figure out his own unique ability?
He did. He discovered that his unique ability is creating space for innovative solutions. He just has this knack for helping people come up with creative solutions they hadn't considered before.
Wow. So it's like he can facilitate a shift in thinking that opens up these new possibilities.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool. So by answering these genius questions, we can start to uncover our own unique abilities
Right.
and really start operating in our zone of genius more consistently.
Yeah, but it's one thing to know where your zone of genius is and another to actually live there, right?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So what else can help us bridge that gap?
Okay, so this is where Hendricks introduces this really interesting concept called Einstein Time.
Einstein Time.
Okay, I'm listening. Yeah, so it's all about shifting our relationship with time so we can experience greater freedom and productivity.
Okay, so not managing time,
Oh,
but managing our relationship with time.
exactly.
Yeah.
The core principle of Einstein Time is this idea that we are the source of time, not its victim.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that our perception of time is fluid and can be influenced by our thoughts and emotions.
That makes sense.
And Hendricks shares how his own struggles with time led him to this realization.
Yeah.
He'd often feel rushed and overwhelmed even when he had plenty of time to complete a task.
Right.
And he realized that fear and stress were actually distorting his perception of time.
It's like when we're stressed or anxious, time seems to just speed up.
Exactly. But he found that by shifting his focus and calming his mind, he could actually create more time.
So it's about finding that sense of peace and presence.
Right. It's like when we're relaxed and present, time seems to expand. And he even introduces this humorous concept of time personas.
Time personas, what's that?
So it's like these different ways we relate to time. For example, there's the time cop who's always punctual and stresses about being late.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's the time slacker who's perpetually behind schedule and struggles with deadlines.
I think I know a few time cops and slackers in my own life.
We all do, right?
Yeah.
And it's just these ingrained patterns around time that might be limiting our freedom and productivity.
Yeah, I can see that.
And Hendricks encourages us to ask ourselves, where in my life am I not taking full ownership? It's about identifying those areas where we're giving our power away to those external pressures and deadlines, rather than creating time from within.
This makes me think about how we often avoid taking full ownership
Yeah.
because we're afraid of what might happen if we truly stepped into our power.
Right.
We sabotage our time and freedom, keeping ourselves stuck in this cycle of busyness and overwhelm.
That's a great insight, and this connects back to the upper limit problem in such a profound way. It's not just about achieving success, it's about embracing the freedom and responsibility that come with it.
So we've explored the upper limit problem in wealth and work, and now it's time to turn our attention to love.
Oh.
Hendricks dedicates a whole section of the book to relationships, and I'm curious to hear what he has to say about it. Why is it that successful people often struggle in relationships?
Hendricks suggests it's a combination of increased upper limit triggers and a lack of healthy relationship models. Success often brings heightened visibility, greater demands on our time, and a potential for power struggles.
Yeah, it's like our old patterns get amplified,
Right.
leading to conflict and disconnection.
Exactly. He uses the example of Jim and Jane, this high-profile couple whose relationship started to unravel after they reached this new level of success.
Right.
They were constantly bickering, caught in the cycle of blame and criticism.
It's like their success put a strain on their relationship,
Yeah.
bringing all those hidden patterns to the surface.
Exactly. And Hendricks also highlights the role of projection in relationship conflicts. This is when we project our own unresolved issues onto our partners,
Right.
leading to misunderstandings and power struggles.
It's like we're trying to control our partner's behavior
Yeah.
rather than taking responsibility for our own growth and healing.
It's not about finding the perfect partner. It's about becoming the best version of ourselves within the relationship.
That's a good point.
And he offers some really practical tips for navigating relationships successfully.
Okay, likewise.
So he emphasizes self-care, expressing appreciation, the power of non-sexual touch, and finding ways to ground ourselves after those intense highs of connection.
So it's about finding that balance between intimacy and autonomy,
Right.
allowing ourselves to grow both as individuals and as a couple.
Absolutely. And he actually ends this section with a beautiful poem from Hafiz that really resonated with me.
Okay, what is it?
The small man builds cages for everyone he knows, while the sage who has to duck his head, when the moon is low and the night is deep, keeps dropping keys all night long for the beautiful rowdy prisoners.
Wow, that's a powerful metaphor for how we can choose to liberate ourselves and those we love from those self-imposed limitations.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we all have the capacity for greatness, and sometimes all it takes is someone to drop the keys and show us the way.
So let's recap what we've uncovered in this deep dive. We explored the upper limit problem, those sneaky barriers that hold us back, the common ways we sabotage ourselves, and some powerful tools for making that big leap into our zone of genius, including Hendricks' genius questions and that concept of Einstein time.
It's all about embracing a new story about ourselves, one that allows for unlimited potential in wealth, work, and love.
And we'll leave you with this final thought to ponder. What would your life look like if you consistently lived in your zone of genius and embraced the freedom of Einstein time?
What would you create? What would you experience? And who would you inspire along the way?
That's for you to discover. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep leaping.